Week 4 is being lied about. Some people are telling you week 4 is sort of a sleepy week in college football. Now, mind you, these are the same people who say they're tired of the same teams hogging all the spotlight. Yet when Bama's playing Vanderbilt and Georgia's playing Kent or whoever they're playing, those are the same people who tell you, oh, this isn't going to be a good week. Well, how about you live up to the reputation you're trying to make for yourselves and look past the top layer of this sport and understand I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 7 games to talk to you about right now that I think make up a dynamite weekend ahead. It's just not number 1 versus number 3. Every one of them's not a top 10 matchup. There's a ton to be excited about. Let me talk about Minnesota-Michigan State for just a second. Michigan State goes up to Washington last week. Michigan State goes to Washington, horrific performance. Run game, non-existent. Pass defense, non-existent. Now they got their backs against the wall, wounded animal mode at home. They are a 3-point dog at home, and that has crossed 0, by the way. So Minnesota, favored by 3. P.J. Fleck taking the crew out on the road for the first time this year. Let me tell you what to watch. Mo Ibrahim. You remember him? He's the running back for Minnesota. Got hurt in the first game last year. Well, he's back this year. He is running the ball extremely well because he's an extremely good player. One thing Michigan State can do is they can limit the run. They have not given up a 100-yard rushing performance in their last 16 games defensively. So that's not all that Minnesota brings to the table, obviously. You've got plenty good enough passing game there. Kurt Shiraka, the offensive coordinator's back. And a lot of people are excited about Tanner Morgan at quarterback and Kurt Shiraka calling plays, and you should be. I happen to think there'll be a few more points scored in this game than the odds makers do, and that's a hint. We're going to have a move on this game later. We may have a couple of moves on this game by the time Saturday gets here. I'm not giving it all tonight because I think we're going to get a positive move in our favor. But look, Minnesota has played mistake-free football so far this year, and if they can take that, package it up, and go on the road, they stand a very good chance of winning this game. Again, I want to reiterate because I think it surprises some of you. Michigan State's a 3-point dog at home, back against the wall. So let's keep an eye on this game. That's the first. That's certainly not the only really, really big spotlight game we have this week. The next one takes place. This is close to home for me. Not geographically, but it is close to home for me emotionally. The next one takes place in Ames, Iowa. Baylor at Iowa State. This is Dave Aranda versus Matt Campbell. Now, I've got it on good authority. They're not going to play a single down, but boy, the coaching matchup is worth the price of admission alone. Iowa State's off to a 3-0 start for the first time since, drumroll please, 2012, according to Stats and Info, a.k.a. producer Jesse. This game's been close for a while. The last 3 times these teams have played, and they play every year. Last 3 times these teams have faced off, the final has been a margin of a combined 11 points. So one-possession games all over the place. Iowa State, really good quarterback play this year. We told you, you shouldn't be surprised about that. Just because they lost Brock Purdy didn't mean they didn't have a Hunter Deckers waiting in the wings. But also, Iowa State in this game last year outgained Baylor by nearly 200 yards and still lost 31-29, which is what really sent Iowa State's season sideways. And it also started to springboard Baylor. And it's a game I still remember vividly because I think we were on Iowa State and it was just box score, not telling what the scoreboard told you in terms of final result. I'm really interested here because Iowa State, unlike last year, they have been forcing turnovers this year. They were plagued by it last year. So pretty good quarterback play, plus in the turnover margin. It's crazy how a season can turn around, how fortunes can turn around. This is a game with a line under 3. At last check, Iowa State's a 2.5-point favorite. It is a noon Eastern kick on ESPN2. Paper pop worthy game there. How do you sit there and look at me with a straight face and say, oh, we don't have any really good games to watch this week. Let's just look ahead to week 5. I got Dave Aranda already with a loss on their resume going up to face an undefeated Iowa State team. What does the matter with you people? Next up, we're not even close to done. USC at Oregon State. Good friend of the program, Yogi Roth, trying to peer pressure me into making a late trip to Corvallis, Oregon earlier today. I don't quite think Yogi gets how our schedule works, but that's okay because his heart is in the right place. USC opened as a 7-point favorite, and then that line's just come down and down and down, and it's right now at 5.5 or 6, depending on where you look. Did you know, if you didn't, I'm about to tell you, Oregon State 8-0 straight up and against the spread at home since last year. So those last 8 games they played at home, they've done really well for themselves. They have a construction project going on at Reser Stadium right now. So it won't be a full capacity. I mean, every seat that's available will be taken. I'm just saying they're not the Trojans going up there and playing in front of a truly packed house. USC, if you want to know why this line is so low, I tried to explain it to you the other night. I'll reiterate. USC is already plus 10 in turnovers this year. And there you see, they are best in the country at this level in turnover margin. Now, you're misunderstanding me if you think I'm trying to discount their record so far. I'm not. There is skill in doing what they're doing. From an odds-making perspective, that is looked at as a lot more randomized, and over a one-game sample size, it's not something that you carry into that game with you. So you may look and you may think, oh, USC, based on the results they've had so far, easily double-digit win this week. Odds makers look at it and say, well, if it's an even turnover battle, then maybe not. So that is going to be a must-see game as well. And after that, they come home, do the USC Trojans, and they play Arizona State. Then they play Washington State. So we're 3 weeks away right now from the game everyone has circled in the Pac-12. That's that game at Utah. So let's keep an eye on that. Let me refresh my screen over here as well and turn the volume down because an ad's about to play. Okay, now this is one that I've been talking to people about all day. And so I want to make sure your eyes are on it too, because we didn't cover it the other night. Texas at Texas Tech, and this thing's gotten all the way up to a 7-point spread now in favor of the Longhorns. Quinn Ewers is going to travel with the team. Probably not going to start at quarterback, but it sounds for all the world like he's very close to returning. In the meantime, it is still on Hudson Card and this ground game. And when I say ground game, I want to emphasize that. Texas Tech, best in the Big 12 right now in run defense. So this is one that they are going to have to grind their way to if they're going to win it. And it's probably a game where Hudson Card's going to have to make some plays. That's what quarterbacks have to do. That's no breaking news. But it's also the first time that we get to see this young but very rapidly improving Texas offensive line go on the road. We don't know what to quantify. We don't know how to quantify that. And we don't know if it's going to be a factor at all, but I'm very interested because it's something that a lot of people have looked at in the preseason, and they probably looked at this game and said, oh, that'll be tough, win. Like, no one chalks this up as a loss for Texas in the preseason, or very few people did. But yet we get to game week, single-digit spread. We know they got West Virginia at home next week, then they got the Oklahoma game. So they're 2 weeks away, for a point of reference, from that Oklahoma game. Lubbock, Texas will be on fire this weekend. Texas Tech folks are really excited about this program, and they're really excited about Joey McGuire as the new head coach. What a scalp to put on the wall if they could get Texas at home this week. Kansas State lost to Tulane last week, Probably cost the Every Given Saturday tour a trip to Norman, Oklahoma. So I'm not all that happy about that part of the equation. That just puts them in the dreaded wounded animal mode. Kansas State at Oklahoma. You look at this and you see nearly a 2-touchdown spread and you think, okay, big deal. Well, it is a big deal because Chris Kleiman is a perfect 3-0 against the spread, 2-1 outright in his brief career in Manhattan, Kansas against the Sooners. Last year, they lost this thing by 6. The year before that, they were over a 3-touchdown underdog. They won it outright. The year before that, they were over a 3-touchdown underdog. They won the thing outright. They, for whatever reason, at Kansas State, have matched up with Oklahoma very well. No picks so far for Dylan Gabriel this year. The Oklahoma quarterback, been spotless in the interception column. Kansas State is third nationally in pass efficiency defense. They have forced 7 interceptions. So if you want to know how that upset could be brewing late in the second half, something has to give. If it gives in way of Kansas State, and you know that you've got a really good ground game there, and if Oklahoma's offense isn't exactly humming like it was in Lincoln last week, who knows? I think it absolutely will be a game worth monitoring, though. Now we get to what many people are calling the main event of the week. And we're not talking about this thing being played in Cameron Indoor or Fog Allen Fieldhouse. And some of you in the other room didn't think I knew my basketball venues, but I do. Duke, excuse me, let me restart that. Undefeated Duke versus undefeated Kansas. How rare is this? Well, it's the first sellout at this venue since 2019, only the second sellout in the past 13 years up there. It's the first 3-0 start for Duke since the Fred Goldsmith era, and whomst amongst us could forget that, 1994. Last time Duke started 3-0. Kansas has not won more than 3 games since 2009. And they're already sitting here on the precipice of hitting their over win total and shocking the world. Jalen Daniels is the quarterback at Kansas. Now, if you are a semi-hardcore college football fan, you're probably guilty of what I'm about to say. You probably hadn't watched much Kansas yet. You plan on watching them this weekend, but you haven't watched them yet. But you've probably seen a highlight or you've seen some stats and you've heard the name Jalen Daniels. And so you have told some buddies of yours who you know are casual fans about how good Jalen Daniels is. You know you have. You've acted like you've watched film on that kid. You've acted like you've watched all the cut-ups and you've just poured over film of the Kansas quarterback. Be real. Most of you haven't. But that's okay. We're amongst friends here. I'm just saying, if you haven't already, if you haven't watched him thread the needle over the middle of the field, if you haven't watched the way they're running that option up there, watch this game this week. Kansas is a 7-point favorite. Okay, Duke, under Mike Elko, not playing half bad either. They already embarrassed Northwestern, so let's keep an eye on this game because I want to tell you that's a noon Eastern kickoff. Does Brando have that game? Did Tim Brando draw Kansas Duke? I got to check on that. Here's what I need to remind you, and I'm going to probably talk about this a little bit later too. The Every Given Saturday Tour, which is just the game that we choose to go to on Saturdays, it's been fairly simple to pick games so far. We are rapidly approaching a point where it's going to get treacherous for us. Because there are some weeks coming up where there are 3 or 4 really headline, national, noteworthy games. And the last thing I thought was that Kansas hosting Iowa State could potentially be one of those next week. But do you understand the 2 games we just went over? If Iowa State were to beat Baylor and Kansas beats Duke, you are looking at a ranked versus ranked matchup potentially in Lawrence, Kansas. I think that's where that game is. So on top of the problems I already have in my life when it comes to choosing games to go to, we may also have that. It's a good problem to have. Good problems around here, but a problem nonetheless. Oh, and by the way, one more game to put on your radar. I told you it was a deep week. People didn't believe me. I hope you believe me now. We're 15 minutes into the show. I'm still talking about headline games this week. Who does North Carolina play Saturday? I'll tell you who they play. They play a team that you thought they would be an underdog against about 3 months ago. And now, lo and behold, we get the game week. Notre Dame versus North Carolina. It ain't the Irish that are favored. It is the Tar Heels minus 1.5. North Carolina feels like a 2-2 team. Did you know they're undefeated? They sit here undefeated still. It's just because they've won close games and you've written them off, but North Carolina's still undefeated. They're a 1.5-point favorite hosting Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame. Notre Dame's coming in there. Only FBS team. North Carolina, the only FBS team. Top 10 offense, bottom 10 defense. It's right on brand. It's exactly what you would expect statistically if you were to look at them. Also, it's not a spot you expected Notre Dame to be in, is it? I will admit this about myself. Now, we had Notre Dame rated lower than most of the preseason punditry out there did. That's the proper word. But even we didn't have them rated probably as low as we needed to have them. We started them 14th. Did I think, though, that Notre Dame was going to be a point spread underdog at North Carolina? No, I did not. Josh Downs may be back this week, by the way, for North Carolina. So keep an eye on that because that's a huge weapon that they could add to an already potent offense. The total in this thing has dropped. I'm just kind of fascinated by it. I'm not betting it, but the total in the game has dropped. If I had a lean on that, it would be over. I have no good feel for it, but if I had a lean on it, it would be over. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure to leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.